Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss the stigma against animation. So this came up because of my adaptation videos where it's like, hey, we have live action adaptations, we have animated adaptations, and something I was thinking about during that, where I was kind of going through the process of just talking about those different things, was a big reason we have so many live action adaptations, and this is for video games specifically, is because animation has a stigma to it. Even if it's CG, if it's 3D, it's still, technically that's still a form of animation. But even if it's CG, it still has a stigma to it. And that's why even when it's a video game adaptation where it's like, you guys should probably do this in CG so that you can make it closer to the actual video game that has, either crazy monsters or crazy superpowers and stuff. You might want to make it closer to CG like this versus constantly doing live action. But I feel like we get live action everything because of the fact that live action is what draws people to the cinema, which is such an old way of saying that. But it's true. That's how they look at it, where it's like, oh, it's live action. And it's because it has that stigma still. It's just, anime itself is the perfect example where, at this, and I've mentioned this, I don't know, this was a long time ago, I think I mentioned this in a video where I was like, at this point, it's just stupid. It goes beyond ignorant. Like, it's been decades. It's just stupid at this point to just walk around on this earth and be like, yeah, anime is like for kids and video games are just for kids. And it's super weird, especially if you go on the video game side of things. People will just be like, yeah, video games are just for kids. And then like the three games that they'll reference will be like Call of Duty, GTA, and like probably Madden or something. And it's like two of those games are clearly not for children. Granted, obviously a lot of kids play them, but that's just how it is. But anime is the same way, and when it comes to animation, whether it's on TV or in theaters, that stigma, I think, is what limits a lot of what we could actually have if people didn't have that issue, where it's like, hey, you can do this in animation, whether it's 2D animation or 3D animation. You could do this. You could do this, and it would totally work. But it's that weird stigma. It's that weird issue of, oh, anime is for kids, or animation in general. If it's CG, it's like, oh, yeah, it's like Toy Story. It's CG or something. It's like, that's what people still think of, which blows my mind, but it just shows how dumb people really are. But I think that stigma against animation, whether 2D or 3D, really stifles, just in general, storytelling, because people will not look at it the same way. Star Wars, I mention all the time, where it's like, hey, watch Clone Wars. It's like some of the best Star Wars is not in the films. That's just a fact. Like, Clone Wars is amazing. Granted, Andor is also amazing, and that was live action, and that's the most recent thing. But there's been amazing moments in Star Wars animation, but tons of people will never see them because it's like, yeah, I don't really want to get into the show. And it's like, you could easily figure out just like the specific episodes to watch and stuff, and it's like, I don't want to do all that. And it's like, oh, you're missing out on some of the best stuff ever. Like, the ending of Clone Wars is some of the best Star Wars there is. Like, hands down, it's so good. But there are people that'll just never see it, and it's like, well, I only know Ahsoka because of live action. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're missing out on like a decade's worth of really good stuff. Like, you really are. And it's just unfortunate. Like, that stigma, who knows if it'll last forever? In a weird way, I almost think it will. It's one of those weird things where, it's like, you wouldn't think we'd have racists still, but it's like, dumb is dumb. That's just how it is. So, unfortunately, I think that stigma is going to stick around almost permanently. Like, it might get a little bit better, piece by piece. Obviously, anime itself has grown, over the last couple of decades, and, it's much more mainstream, but it's still just seen as kids. And let's be honest, it's because when you see anime, or, when the layman sees anime, it's like Pokemon. Let's be honest, that's still what it is. It's just like when it comes to video games, even though they'll still say games are for kids, they'll still just reference like GTA and Call of Duty, because that's all they know. But it's like, yeah, it's for kids. It's like, you just name like the worst thing kids should possibly be playing. But when it comes to anime, it's like, yeah, Pokemon, maybe Dragon Ball Z, and that's about it. Those are the two, Pokemon and DBZ. And it's like, that's for kids, and that's it. That's all they see. And so that stigma translates no matter what, regardless of the animation form. It's just like, once it's CG, or once it's not real people doing real stuff, it's like, yeah, it's for kids. Like, it's super weird. So it just popped into my head doing those other adaptation videos, and it's like, I think that stifles storytelling, because there are so many people that won't tell the story in a medium that could work, because admittedly, there's so many people that are like, I'm not going to see it. And so companies are like, well, we're not going to make it. Like, I'm not going to let you make this in 3D animation when, that might cut off like 20, even if it's 15% of the money. That 15% is money we could have had. That 15% is, thousands upon thousands of dollars, if not millions, depending on, how ridiculous the popcorn is. But in all seriousness, I do think that stifles how things are told, because there are so many things, and the reason this came up from specifically like my video game adaptation ideas was because of the fact that I think video game adaptations work better when they're CG. Like, they don't have to be 2D animation, but they work better when they're CG because it allows you to do more that's actually closer to the story. Because most adaptations, well, actually a lot of adaptations really do their own thing, so it's super odd. I can't even say like most adaptations, follow the game, but like most of them don't. But on the rare occasion that they do, they're going to be live action. And in general, that's what we tend to get. Fallout is live action. The Last of Us was live action. Borderlands, which actually followed, for the most part, the games, that was live action. Until Dawn was live action. Arcane is animated, but that is so different. It's interesting because it's not even close to being like how the game actually plays, or even story-wise. Like, it's the story elements, but they're definitely told in a completely different way. So it's really interesting in that sense. And then you have, of course, the Resident Evil movies, and then you have the Resident Evil CG movies, which tell their own story, but they're in between the actual canon of the games, as where all the live action stuff is just like, whatever. So I think it stifles a lot of things when it comes to adaptations in particular, but I definitely think there are tons of stories that could easily be told. And if it was told in, some animated form, whether it's 3D or 2D, it could actually be told better. And then, of course, once again, it goes right back to companies and all that stuff, where it's like, it might not sell better because it's animated. I don't think, an animated James Bond would really do the trick, but it could. If they wanted to, they could totally do a good, James Bond. I think James Bond is a good middle ground where it's, the over-the-topness is really just the fact that he survived some of the stuff that he does. You can do it in live action. Just have a pretty place and then a couple explosions, and it's like, it's fine. You can do that in live action. It costs you a bunch of money, but it's simpler than like a video game adaptation. That's why I'm mostly thinking in that way. But there are tons of stories. Like, if you're doing fantasy stories, you might want to do like animation. It's going to cost you way less money to do the whole thing in animation, whether 2D or 3D, and you can get like everything in there. Like, it's a lot easier to have a dragon that's CG when everything else is CG versus being like, all right, we got to composite this dragon in here. We got to make sure the shadows are good. The flames on the shadows have to exist. Or no, I said that backwards. The shadow on the flame, like, not even the shadow is not what I'm thinking of, but just like, the heat waves and stuff like that, just the distortion and everything. That's what I was thinking of, not the shadows on the flames. But like, it's a lot harder to do that compared to everything is CG. You have like a digital camera where you can go in and construct everything the way that you want. You can move around this 3D space perfectly, compared to having it in live action and then having like this fake thing needing to be there. Like, there's so much extra work that even to this day, it takes like the right person to care enough, and you can tell when it happens. Like, you watch a CG movie and it's like, you can tell in certain movies where it's like, oh, they really planned this out. They were like, hey, somebody somewhere was like, I want this to look exactly like this, so when you film it in live action, please do this. Like, you can tell when there's movies like that and when there's movies not like that. It might be a subtle thing, or maybe you have to be a giant nerd like me to recognize, just some of those smaller details, but it's definitely in there. You can tell when it's like, oh, they just had to do it, and then, oh, they were like planning to do it this way. Like, you can tell sometimes. But I think if you go CG, it helps. It's just that unfortunate stigma, I think, stops a lot, because I'm sure there are tons of stories that could totally work where, companies might reject them or whatever, and it's like, we don't have the budget for this, or it's like, that's too ridiculous. And I'm like, I bet it wouldn't be if it was an animation form. I bet you could pull off everything you wanted to do in a nice tight budget compared to, the ridiculous amounts of money that movies, get paid, there's ridiculous amounts of money that are spent to make movies. I could not figure out how I was trying to say that sentence. But compared to that, you do it all in CG, and it's like, and let's be honest, it's not going to be like, Blur Studios doing it, how they would do the Knights of the Old Republic things where it's like millions upon millions of dollars. Like they're never going to be like that. I wish they would be, because they could be. You could spend, they spend all that money on live action. If they did it for CG, if they spent the amount of money they spent on Avengers, which, I mean, let's be honest, there's so much CG in that almost fits in line with the conversation as being CG. But if the amount of money spent on Avengers Endgame could be spent on a movie that was purely CG, and we're talking including however much money Robert Downey Jr. got paid, which I think was $60 million, if not more than that for Endgame, all of that just put in the CG, the movies that you could get would be ridiculous. And I feel like the stigma is the thing that stops people from realizing you could have that level of animation that's so good. It could be, almost video game quality. Like, people that don't play games can easily look at games and be like, wow, they look realistic. I mean, look at the GTA 6 stuff where it's like the quality, they're putting like the bubbles in the beer and stuff like that. You can see the liquids moving around as all this other stuff is happening inside, this game. And it's like, you can have animation like that in an hour-and-a-half long film. You can do that for the amount of money that we spend on live action movies and the cost of the actors and stuff like that. Put all of that in animation and tell me that it can't be great. But it's just the stigma. It's the stigma that will stop it from happening more often than not. Like, it's super rare that you're gonna get something done in that way that's not just straight up anime. Like, Demon Slayer is like, okay, well, that doesn't really count because it's a whole anime series based off of a manga. Like, that's what anime do. They get movies. Obviously, Demon Slayer does it in a different way where it's like you have to go to the movies to see like straight up story arcs, which I really hope that is not how all anime go moving forward, because I hate that idea. But that's just, it's a personal thing. That's, once again, different conversation. But if it's not straight up anime, you might have a rare occasion. Like, there was the Lord of the Rings anime movie that came out. And unfortunately, I heard that it was just kind of meh. And I was like, that sucks, because I thought that was really interesting, because it was cool. You go to the movies, and I'm going to see, whatever random movie I'm seeing. And then it's like, here's a trailer amongst all the regular trailers, and it just plays. And it's like, here's a straight up trailer for a brand new anime film that is a Lord of the Rings movie. And let's be honest, I think the only reason it even got like a regular trailer the way that it did was because of the fact that it was Lord of the Rings. If it was anything else and it was just a new anime movie, it probably wouldn't have gotten that trailer. It would have been like The Boy and the Heron, where it's like, I did not see that trailer in theaters when I was going to see any of my, live action films. It was only the Lord of the Rings movie that happened to pop up. And it's like, I think it's just because it was Lord of the Rings. But if it's like a Studio Ghibli movie, it's like, you can see the trailer on, on YouTube. But they may have done The Boy and the Heron. I may have seen that like once or twice. But I remember like a couple of times seeing the Lord of the Rings trailer. And it's just a rare thing. It's like, unless it's a specialty event, the Studio Ghibli events where it's like, hey, we're doing this movie, Kiki's Delivery Service, Fathom always popping up is like, hey, shout out to Fathom. I love them just because they keep playing, classic films all that effing time. But unless it's that, a classic anime movie, no one from Fathom is going to see this, but can you guys do the Cowboy Bebop movie? I just need to throw that out there. I love that movie. I would love to see that in theaters. That movie's effing amazing. But it's just one of those interesting things. That stigma, I think, unfortunately, like I said, I think it'll get better over time, but it's going to be very slow. We're still at a point where, like I said, whether it's games or anime, it's like, yep, for kids. And it's like, the thing, like, it doesn't even make sense. Anime-wise, of course, it makes more sense because most people that don't know anime are instantly, like I said, going to go to, like, Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. And then when it comes to the gaming side of things, they'll somehow name Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty and still be like, yeah, kids. For kids. It's super weird. It's like I said, at this point, it's just dumb. It's like, I hate to just call everybody stupid, but it's like, at this point, it's beyond ignorant. It's just straight stupidity. Like, you've had more than enough time to just learn something as simple as, adult stories can be told in different mediums. I think that's why it always bothers me the most, where people say like, anime is just for kids or games are for kids. It's like, you have to be really, really stupid to think that only a child's story can be told in video game form or anime form. Like, people act like the only way something's mature is if it's in a book or live action. And I'm like, what are you talking? Like, it just blows my mind how simple-minded some people can be when it comes to just concepts of storytelling. Because it's like, how can you just not tell? Like, there are kids' books and there are adult books. That should be the only thing I have to say to make you understand, or at least think that something can be mature in anime form or video game form. But I don't want to go on a tirade calling a bunch of people stupid, even though they already are. I just want to talk about the fact that the stigma is very unfortunate. Like, it definitely downplays a lot of things that, once again, if you put the money in, that we already put into live action stuff, the immaculate sets that can be built and the insane things that have to be done, and you just put all that in the CG, you can make something amazing. I mean, here's a really good example, and I found this out recently because I didn't actually know this, but the movie Rango, I did not know that was made by Lucasfilm, and that was their first fully CG movie. Also, I highly recommend you check out the Light and Magic documentary. It's got 2 seasons on Disney+. It is amazing. I know I mentioned that in some video recently, but please watch that because it's just really, really good. If you're like into just creation and behind the scenes stuff, it is amazing. It is absolutely amazing. But in that, they talk about how Rango was their first fully CG film, and I had no idea. I never saw Rango myself, but it made me want to see it because I saw some of the behind the scenes stuff, and I was like, wow, this is like way more detailed than I realized for a movie. I mean, heck, I think that movie's over 10 years old, right? Or am I crazy? I don't know when. I don't remember when they came out because, like I said, I wasn't into it. I never saw it. So I have no idea how old that movie is, but I think it's like a 10-year-old movie at this point. And just looking at the behind the scenes stuff, I was like, wow, they put like an insane amount of detail. Like they showed, like they wanted it to be realistic, and they had like a rusty pipe with like water leaking out, and I was like, wow, the detail on that rusty pipe, it looks like a real life rusted pipe. It was just like, when you look at video games where it's like the detail on this is so ridiculous, that thing looks real. And that's what it was like for Rango, at least for, obviously like the materials, obviously the characters are anthropomorphic, but the way they did it, I was like, oh, I didn't know that's how that movie looked. Like, detail wise, just the world itself looks so realistic. And I was like, that's interesting. And that was from Lucasfilm. And I'm like, stuff like that can be done consistently. And unfortunately, it's just not because of the way it's seen. Obviously, if you do a mature thing, you obviously have to tell people like, hey, this is a mature CG film. And it's just hard to do that for people. Like it's just the stigma that's there. I think, like I said, we're inching closer and closer. There are little bits and pieces here and there that kind of help people. Secret Level on the video game side, Arcane on the video game side. For people that actually watch Castlevania, on the anime side, obviously, that a bit more mature and stuff. But Love, Death, and Robots, I think is a good example. Tons of people watch that. Tons of people that watch that probably don't, play games and stuff like that. And it's all, amazing animation and different types of animation, CG and, 2D, like all sorts of types of animation kind of combined together in all these short stories. And it's like that little stuff like that helps. I wish everyone saw the Animatrix. I mean, honestly, the Animatrix is so good. It's like, it is one of the most underrated things ever. And it's like, dude, the Animatrix is top tier. Like, honestly, the Animatrix is probably like the 3rd best thing in the Matrix. Some people will say it's the 2nd best thing, but personally, I like the Matrix Reloaded the most. So it's like, I'd go Matrix Reloaded. Honestly, I would go Matrix Reloaded, and then I'd watch Animatrix before I watch the first Matrix again. That's just me. I know that is an insanely hot take because everybody's like, after the first Matrix, they all suck. I don't feel that way. But the Animatrix, it's so good. Especially the specific, the 2 history episodes, they're so good. They're absolutely amazing. And most of those are 2D animation except for like the very first one, which I don't know why in the world I have the actual title, The Flight of the Osiris, in my head, but that's the title of the first short film, because that's the one that actually takes place in between the Matrix and the Matrix Reloaded. Like, that's what they talk about. Like, oh, these people died to give us this. It's a very Star Wars A New Hope thing. Like, many Bothans died. It's the Rogue One of the Matrix. Like, the Flight of the Osiris. But there's so many things out there where it's like animation can do a lot more, and we're just in this situation where it's like people don't realize how much we could really get if we just went CG. If we, 2D animation might take a long time, but I think CG would be like a little bit faster, but both would take forever. But both would also be amazing. You put the time and money into it, you can tell the same stories. You can tell the same stories better. And that's just, honestly, that's a fact. Like, you can tell the same stories better because you can do more. Like, there's more freedom to it. It's just the fact that so many people are like, it's not real people doing real things. It ain't real. So I don't know. I don't know what it'll take to really have like that giant shift. I think it'll just take somebody really just with a bunch of money that just does it. Honestly, I think that's really the only thing we can do, because honestly, the companies, movie companies are the same as video game companies as far as I'm concerned, where it's still people, at this point, it still feels like people from the 1950s that are like, I just don't get this thing. Oh, we made money? Do that exact same thing 800 times. And it's like, don't do that. Stop doing that. Like, change things up. Let things be unique. But that is unfortunately where we are. But I think it'll change. It takes time, just like in the video game industry. It'll still take time before, it's just full-on nerds in absolute control. It'll take time in the movie industry as well. It'll take time before there's people that are like, hey, we could do all of this in animation and get more out of it. Heck, you could probably do 2 movies, depending on the movie, of course. Like, depending on the actors and how much they pay, is like, you could get 2 to 3 effing movies out of the amount of money that you're paying these people. Just to show up on screen. But those are my thoughts on that. I would love to know what you guys think. Like, does the stigma against animation stifle, really just in general, like storytelling? Like, I would love to know your thoughts on that, because I think it does. I think it stifles, I guess I shouldn't say it stifles storytelling. It stifles the ability for the stories to be told. That's what I would say, because there are stories, I barely touched on it, but I believe that there are stories that if they believed in animation more stories would, be given a shot. Like, they'd be greenlit, because it's like, oh, well, we expect this to cost, so much money. And then it's like, well, if you did it in CG or you did it in 2D, it would cost you this much. But it's like, well, we're not going to do that, because like only kids are going to go see that. It's like, well, no, it's an adult story. It's like, but it's animated, so it's for kids. Like, I think that is something that's legit. Like, I'm sure there are tons of stories that might seem beyond the scope of like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. I would almost guarantee it. Obviously, I'm just talking to someone that knows like a tiny bit. I'm not in the industry. I just, pay attention enough. But like, I could almost guarantee that there are stories that are seen as too over the top or too ridiculous. And it's like, you could have done that with animation easily. When I say easily, I just mean money-wise. I don't mean like work-wise. Like, it's still not easy. But you could have done it. Like, it could have easily been done, and you'd be shocked the amount of money that gets spent on stuff being in live action, where it could have just been like, if all of this was CG, it would be like 10 times better. I'm sure there are tons of stories that are like that, where it's like, you actually limited yourself by forcing it to be live action. There's so many things, when it comes to movies, like, oh, we didn't have the budget, we didn't have the time. A lot of that, I guarantee you, would be cut down if it was, CG. But of course, I wouldn't expect that to happen. And that's also a totally different thing, to just be like, you can't just be like, well, I'm gonna go from live action to CG. You can't just do that in the middle. Obviously, that's insane. But thinking in advance, could this be told in animation? Which literally any story could be. It's just an interesting thing, But those are my thoughts on it. Wanted to bring it up because it's a fascinating little thing. It's like a little side tangent that I hope does get better over time, as more people just realize, hey, we can just do CG, we can do 2D, and people will actually see it as something special. I mean, that's another thing. It's at this point, if somebody did it, it would be so effing rare as a full mature story done in theaters, that people would be like, holy crap, like that's like, it would be like a rare phenomenon. Like, oh my God, what is this? This is art. Like, people just wouldn't expect it. So it would almost be like a brand new thing. Like, it would be the type of thing where people are like, did you guys know animation is cool? It's like, where have you been? Where the F have you been? But that's where we are. Hopefully it gets better. Like I said, I would love to know your thoughts on the stigma against animation and stuff like that. So please let me know what you guys think about it. Please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.